I did that.
No, I did that. Okay.
That's good too.
All right, welcome everyone. Should we get started or wait a few minutes? To see if anyone else comes. Wait a moment, I apologize that we don't have any snacks. I did that. You didn't, I didn't.
It was a
There was a miscommunication.
Apparently I was supposed to bring them, but I didn't.
It's okay.
Yes.
Welcome. Thank you for being here. Just a few things in case we run right to the end. I just want to say some things now. If you're online, make sure that your full name, unless Marilyn, I see you, you're good. If you're off camera, make sure your full name or anyone that you are with is also named. Just some reminders, the salute is coming up March 15th. This year, we're doing an educator-only reception right in this room. There will be mimosas and raffles, so if you come to the reception, you'll get raffle tickets. And
Educator early reception before the main
Before,
event.
yes,
That's still.
that's from 2 to 2:45. And then don't forget to get your tribute ads in, and RSVP. And all of the information is on our website, www.wonkyjewish.salute. Okay?
Wonkyjewish.org.
Okay, yeah. Okay, all right.
You
Go
ready?
ahead. Yeah.
All right,
Sure.
so this is part 2, all about the Jewish life cycles. The last one, which was when?
2 months ago?
Yep, we talked about birth. We talked about the bris, the Brit Milah, we talked about baby namings, and we talked about bar mitzvah. And so today we're gonna continue on with the life cycles, which are really a big circle, right? Because now we're talking about weddings, which then you could go back to weeks, I guess, after that. We'll do weddings and then we're gonna talk about death. So, yeah, starting a little more happy and then it's more serious. But it's all part of the life cycle, which really definitely is a circle. So does anybody know what the picture is up on the screen? What is that? What's a chuppah? What a chuppah is?
Wedding canopy.
Decorated. Wow. Okay, wedding canopy can be decorated any which way. Anybody know what it symbolizes?
It's covered by God.
Be covered by God, that's interesting. I didn't do it before. Nice. Other thoughts what it might symbolize?
The wedding.
Wedding. So it symbolizes the home that the couple is going to build together. And a chuppah can be made of lots of different materials and it can be decorated in lots of different ways, but it's always open on all 4 sides. Does that remind you of anything else that was opened on all 4 directions? In Jewish tradition?
Not so.
Not a sukkah, the sukkah is the opposite, right? The walls are closed. So Abraham, who was best known for his hospitality, it said that he had a tent that had doors on all 4 sides so that he could always see visitors come. So he could always welcome them into their home. So it symbolizes the home that the couple will build that will be open to visitors and people to come and spend time.
How do you spell it?
I know that, but that's my quota. I like to join.
Like with most Hebrew words, it's not really one branch. So like, I think I probably have it in this. At some point. All right, so I always like to start with a little bit of biblical text. So is there somebody who'd like to read us this text from Genesis?
I'll read it if I can. I want to get the pictures off of here, though, because it's covering it up. The participants.
Yeah. You should be able to.
You'll have to move.
You have to do that, yeah.
Yep, I can't get them off.
If you read a different one, you can figure it out. Somebody in the room want to read it? Go ahead, please.
The Lord God said, "It is not good for man to be alone. I will make a fitting helper for him." And the Lord God formed out of the earth all of the wild beasts and all of the birds of the sky and brought them to the man to see what he would call them. And whatever the man would call each living creature, that would be its name. And the man gave names to all the cattle and to all of the birds and of the sky and to all the wild beasts But for Adam, no fitting helper was found. So the Lord God cast a deep sleep upon man, and while he slept, he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh of that spot. And the Lord God fashioned that rib he had taken from the man into a woman, and he brought her the man. Then the man said, "This one at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. This one shall be called woman, for from man she was taken. Hence a man leaves his father and mother and clings to his wife, so that they become one flesh. The two of them were naked, the man and his wife, yet they felt no shame."
So this idea that man and woman are really created from the same, right? That a woman is taken from a man's rib. There are two versions of creation in the Genesis. The other one has man and woman being created at the same time. But this one that is like that God tells Adam to name all the animals, and when Adam's looking at it, he sees, a horse, a cow, a pig, a fish, whatever he sees, and there's a male and a female of each one, but he doesn't see anything that's like him. And so God is created, and the Hebrew in here says that God is going to create isha negdo. Literally means a woman against him. And then it says to be his helper. And so the idea is about this tension that a woman is there to help her partner, but also to stand against him when need be, right? To stand up to him and to be a reflection or pointing out good and bad, and to be both a helper and someone who stands up and challenges.
I like her.
You like that?
I do too.
So,
People, yeah.
He's
good,
good.
yeah.
That is people.
so that's a really interesting thing. There's also another thing, which I don't think I have in here, but there's a place in the Talmud, which is another source of Jewish law, that says that when every soul is created in heaven, that God takes that soul and splits them in half. And that your goal in life is to find the other half of your soul. So the idea of a soul.
Wow.
Where that comes from, that you spend your life looking. There's a tradition that says that when a baby is born, there's a voice in heaven that's calling out, this person is meant for this person. Like the person you're supposed to be with, it's like ordained from the beginning. So those are three just kind of different traditions talking about marriage. And I really, really love this one. It's also from the Talmud. Would somebody like to read this one for us?
I can read it now.
Oh, for it, Marilyn.
Okay, Rabbi Akiva taught if a man Ish and the woman Isha merit reward through a faithful marriage, the divine presence rests between them. The words Ish and Isha are almost identical. The difference between them is the middle letter Yod in Ish and the final letter Ha in Isha. These two letters can be joined to form the name of God spelled Yod Ha. But if due to impropriety, they do not merit reward, the divine presence departs, leaving in each word only the letters Aleph and Shin, which spell Ish, fire. Therefore, fire consumes them.
Okay, so if you look at the little red letter in the middle of the Hebrew, so the red that's a yud. And the last letter in woman is a hey. And if you put the yud and hey together, or the yud together, you get God, the name of God. So it's saying if you take away the element of the divine that is in a marriage between a man and woman, you're left with nothing. So that's a really interesting way to look at it, because marriage is considered a partnership between a man and a woman, but it says, but within that partnership between man and woman, God resides there. It's a holy. Questions, comments? You guys heard that before? It's one of my favorites.
I didn't.
All right, so let's talk about what goes on with weddings, okay? Here are some of the things that happen before a wedding. So that picture, it's kind of a strange angle, but that picture on the right is a mikvah. Mikvah is a ritual bath. And there are different times it's used. It's used for conversion. It's used for different things, but it's also used by a woman. Traditionally, when a woman goes to a married woman would go to the mikvah once a month after her cycle. It's kind of a whole tradition of coming together and separating, coming back together between a man and a woman. So the first time a woman would go to the mikvah traditionally would be the night before her wedding. So she would go and she would immerse, and it kind of symbolizes almost like a a renewal or rebirth and kind of purification, getting ready. So a woman, woman who observes this tradition would go to a mikvah the night before her wedding, would dunk under the water, be totally submerged and come out fresh, ready for the wedding. An ufruf is a tradition that takes place the Shabbat, the Sabbath before the wedding. And depending on what kind of synagogue you're in, either the bride and the groom or just the groom would be called up to the Torah, given an honor to recite the blessings before the Torah. And after the blessings, people would throw candy at them. And it's supposed to symbolizes the sweetness that they should have in their lives. So an interesting thing about weddings is in some communities and more traditional communities, the bride and groom fast on their wedding day. They don't eat or drink. And it's understood as a miniature Yom Kippur. You guys have heard of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement? And it's kind of this very serious day where you're thinking about the mistakes you've made in your life up until this point, because you're about to make this huge change in commitment. And as you go into it, you're fasting and you're praying, and it's a very, very serious day. So if you've ever been to an Orthodox wedding and the bride and groom look tremendously serious, that's why they're fasting. So probably don't necessarily feel so great. They're praying really seriously. Sometimes there's, I think, a little bit of fear and nervousness there. But so sometimes you see in an Orthodox wedding, bride and groom look very, very serious. And that's why right after the wedding is when they break their fast. Traditionally, weddings are not held on certain days. So traditionally, they're not held on the Sabbath, like Saturday during the day. They're generally not held on festivals. And then there's a couple of periods during the year where most usually there aren't weddings. One is the 3 weeks before Tisha B'Av, which is in the summer, remembers the destruction of the temple. And the other one are the days between Passover and Shavuot, the exception of Lag BaOmer, which is in the middle there. Some just up to Lag BaOmer, depending on your custom. But so there's certain days that are kind of times of semi-mourning where weddings usually aren't here. And it's also traditional. I know there's a whole, with non-Jewish weddings, the thing about not seeing the bride and groom not seeing each other the day of the wedding. In traditional Jewish weddings, you actually don't see each other for a week before the wedding.
That's the Orthodox.
Yep. Yeah, the traditional way. Yeah. So, all right. So I gotta tell you, I used some pictures from my own family here. So this is on my 20th wedding anniversary. My husband and our 20th wedding anniversary, we had a second wedding. Because our first wedding, we got married, was not Orthodox, it was not traditional. We wanted to have a more traditional wedding. So that's my mom. I remember you before blessing, that's my mom next. So that's 13 years ago, a long time. So before, and again, this is at a more traditional wedding, an Orthodox wedding, it might not always be done at a non-Orthodox wedding. There's something done called Kabbalat Panim, which literally just means welcoming guests. And it's kind of a pre-wedding reception. In an Orthodox wedding, the men and women would be in separate rooms. In a less Orthodox wedding, everybody might be together. And it's a way of honoring and bringing joy to the bride and groom. It's considered a great deed, a mitzvah, a good thing to bring joy to the bride and groom on their wedding day. So the bride, in Hebrew called a kala, would be sitting on a special chair, and people come in and they would come and greet her and give her blessings. And it's a very happy moment. And the groom is in a different room, and often they do something called a tish, where he'll share a few words of Torah, and they'll drink lots of l'chaims, they'll drink some alcohol, not the groom because he's fasting, but everybody else. It's food for everybody who's there, both in the men's room and the women's room, except the bride and groom who aren't eating.
I've seen some groom drinking. I've seen some.
Yeah?
I've seen some Orthodox.
Okay, that's interesting. They're fasting and drinking. That's gonna be really interesting.
Yeah.
It's during this time that the ketubah, the wedding contract, is signed.
They break the plate.
What?
That's when they break the plate.
And in Orthodox weddings, they will break a plate, which symbolizes that this wedding that's about to be had cannot be, it's like a plate that's broken. You can't put it back together. Once the wedding has happened, you can't
And
unput
it's a
it.
good thing if you get a piece of plate.
Yes.
If you're not married.
What's that?
And if you're not married and you get a piece of that plate, it's.
Supposed to be auspicious and bring in luck. Yeah.
Nothing yet, though.
Yeah, so. Right, so then the next thing that happens is the bride and groom come together. So the bride and groom, who in theory haven't seen each other in a week, the groom comes in accompanied by all the other men and will take the veil and cover up the bride's face. Okay, so this remembers two different stories from the Bible. One is of Rebecca and Isaac. When Rebecca is coming to meet Isaac for the first time, was arranged marriage at that time, she sees Isaac from a distance and she covers her face with a veil to show modesty. The other one, which is a more interesting story, I think, is that Jacob falls in love with Rachel and wants to marry her and makes arrangements with her father that he'll work for 7 years in order to marry her. He's very much in love with her. And they have the wedding and the wedding night, and he wakes up in the morning and realizes that instead of marrying Rachel, who he loves, he's accidentally married Rachel's sister, Leah. He was tricked by his father-in-law, who said it's not our way to marry the younger before the older, but oh, by the way, if you work for me another 7 years, you can still marry Rachel. And so how did he make this mistake? Because she was wearing a heavy veil and he couldn't see who he was marrying. So it has become a tradition ever since then that at a Jewish wedding, before the wedding, the groom is the one that comes and puts the veil over his wife's face to make sure he's getting the right girl. I will tell you just a quick story really quickly. My daughter, who's been married about 3.5 years, her wedding was at the Shul in Bayside, and it was like Chabad weddings are going to be outside. It was in August, and my daughter and son-in-law had not seen each other in a week, and he came in and he was just glowing to see her. They were so excited, and he came over, and as he took the veil and lifted it over her face, there was a crash of thunder so loud the building shook. I have never heard anything like it. To which my father said that was my mother clapping from heaven. And Geffen, who was the groom, hears this. He's newly religious. He hears the thunder and he turns around to ask his friend, "What's the blessing for thunder?" To which the rabbi pointed at my daughter and said, This is what you're doing now. Don't worry about that." Okay, very funny story. So groom covers the bride's face. And after that, it's actually a very special moment. The parents of the bride and groom give blessings to the bride. They'll lean down and give a special blessing to her and cry thinking about it. Both because I remember when I did the second wedding, my parents doing it for me and doing it for my daughter.
Can you talk about the 7?
Yeah, we'll get there. We'll definitely get there. Now we're gonna get to the wedding. So this is the before part. The groom and the other men leave the room. They go wait down by the wedding canopy for the woman to come in, etc. Okay. Okay, the ceremony. This is I just used all the pictures from my wedding. What can I tell you? So this is from our second wedding. It was in the rabbi's back there. So we talked about the chuppah celebrating the home that they're going to build, being up and outside. There are lots of ways to honor people during the ceremony. Excuse me, one of them is to hold the poles, right? Sometimes you have a freestanding chuppah like the one we saw at the beginning, which just the poles are standing up, but a lot of times people are holding it. Sometimes it's just somebody's tallis, like the prayer shawl that they'll use attached to the poles. There are all sorts of ways of doing it, but one of the honors you can give is to hold the poles. Again, Orthodox weddings are often held outside. This is something I did not know when I first got involved 25, 30 years ago with Chabad. And I went to Mendel Schmatkin's sister's wedding, which was downtown at the Hilton in February. And I showed up in heels and, pantyhose, and all of a sudden everybody's walking outside and it's 25 below. And I'm like,
What did you?
interesting introduction. So yeah. And the groom will sometimes wear a kittel. So if you look at the groom here, you can see him over here. That's my husband, wearing this kind of white garment. It's worn at 3 different times in life. One is at a wedding. The other is every Yom Kippur. So I told you the wedding is like a little Yom Kippur. It kind of says serious day. And it's also worn, men are buried in a kittel. And the white symbolizes purity and holiness and like the angels. And it makes kind of everybody equal. There's also a beautiful tradition that the souls of our loved ones are present at occasions like this. So, before my daughter got married, she and I went to my mother's grave and we literally brought a physical wedding invitation and we left it on the grave and we invited her, and that must have been why the thunder was there, because she showed them.
Yeah. That's what I did now with my friend.
Yeah.
She came from Israel and her daughter is getting married in October in Israel. And she had, you remember Ellen Schneidman?
Sure.
We went to her grave and we invited her, she invited her to the wedding. Yeah. It's really beautiful.
All right, so what happens? So the bride and groom are escorted in like royalty. Now, there are different ways that this is done, right? Sometimes the groom is escorted in by his father and father-in-law, and the bride is escorted in by her mother and mother-in-law. Or sometimes the bride comes in with her parents and the groom comes in with his parents. I have seen both ways done. You can see me, I'm coming in there with my parents. Often, the people in the procession will be carrying candles, which just symbolizes light and joy, etc. The candles at my daughter's wedding when it was pouring rain outside did not stay lit. Big surprise. The groom goes in first and then he waits for the bride. And once the bride comes in, there's a tradition of the bride walking 7 times in a circle around the groom. And again, this symbolizes the relationship that's between them, the home that they're going to create. The number 7 comes a bunch in the wedding. We'll talk more about that. In less traditional weddings, I've seen it where, in fact, this is what I did the first time I got married, where the bride circles the groom 3 times, the groom circles the bride 3 times, and then they walk in a circle together. So either way, but that circling is very traditional. Often, music is being played, etc. And then there's a greeting at the beginning, Baruch haba. Maybe you guys have heard the phrase Baruchim habaim, which means welcome. So the first prayer that's chanted is Baruch haba, welcoming everybody to this very joyous occasion. Questions, Shapar?
When I taught Tu B'Shvat this past week,
Yeah.
I told the kids about, now I don't know if this is actually true or just traditional, but they said that when boy babies were born, or what I've read, when boy babies were born, cedar trees were planted, and girls, the cypress, cedar is strong, cypress has the fragrance, and that at their wedding, the boughs or the branches for the chuppah came from the tree of the cypress and the cedar tree.
I have definitely heard that. I have not seen it done. It's interesting because my in-laws planted trees when my 2 older kids were born, and I remember thinking, oh, maybe we'll do that. We didn't do that for my dog. Guess we could have. Yeah, that's a really nice tradition. Thank you, Carol.
Yep.
All right, so there are 2 halves of the wedding ceremony itself. The first is Kiddushin. Now, originally, once upon a time, these two sections used to be separate. You used to have this betrothal, the Kiddushin, and then maybe months later, you had the rest of the wedding ceremony. In modern times, they've gotten that, they put them together. And the reason is that according to Jewish law, once you were betrothed and you had this official engagement, if you decided to call off the wedding, you had to actually go through and get a divorce. So to avoid having to do that, they've put the 2 parts of the ceremony together. So Kiddushin is like the word Kiddush or Kaddish, and it means sanctification or holiness. And this section is performed over a glass of wine. Wine or grape juice is drunk 2 times during the ceremony. This is the first time. In a traditional wedding, the groom gives the bride a ring. In many other ceremonies, you'll have the bride and groom exchange rings. During the wedding, the groom will say to the bride, with this ring, you're consecrated to me according to the laws of Moses and Israel. And honestly, once they say that in front of 2 witnesses, they're married. Say that in Hebrew. It's a whole big deal. Like if you do like a mock wedding at a Sunday school or a camp or whatever, you do not want to actually say those words because you could end up marrying 2 kids to each other by accident. Don't want to do that. And traditionally the ring is put on the woman's index finger because that's supposed to have a vein that goes directly to the heart. She doesn't keep wearing it there just for the ceremony. again, in order to be the wedding to be official, it has to be witnessed by 2 adults. According to Jewish law, it would be 2 Jewish adult men who are observant of Jewish law. And the ketubah, the marriage contract, is read aloud. I also forgot to say, traditionally, the ketubah is actually not signed by the bride and groom. It's signed by these 2 witnesses who have to like be there and actually like watching up front and close. They have to hear the words, they have to see the exchange of rings. Traditionally, by the way, the ring does not have any precious jewels in it. It's just a circle, a gold band that's uninterrupted. So that's the first half of the wedding. And the second half, sorry, about the wedding contract, this second half includes the recitation of the 7 blessings, the Sheva Brachot. There are 7 separate blessings that are said. They say that every Hebrew word for joy is included in these words. They're also said over a cup of wine. And again, often this is another way to honor people. So often you call up a different person for each of these blessings that you could say to honor somebody. And the wedding ends with the breaking of a glass. Right, you guys heard of that before? They put down a glass on the ground, the groom stomps on it, it breaks. Everybody shouts Mazel Tov. And the breaking of the glass, no?
No, I was just something with, no, you're correct. Okay, as always.
Okay. Make a mistake, let me know.
No.
It symbolizes the destruction of the temple, and the idea is that even at the times of great joy, we remember sad moments. Everybody shouts Mazel Tov, and that's the end of the wedding. Is the actual text of the 7 blessings, right? About the first blessing is over the grape juice. And there's part in there about people being created in God's image. This prayer for Zion, for Jerusalem, which we find very often. And then you'll see the part in there about gladness, and joy and happiness and gladness and jubilation and cheer and delight and love and friendship and harmony and fellowship, all of these beautiful words. And yes. And then there's time for the bride and groom alone. It's called Yichud. It's time for them to break their fast, right? Because they haven't eaten in 24 hours, maybe less, depending on the time of the day of the wedding. There's somebody guarding the door to make sure they're uninterrupted. It's just a little time alone. And as you know, weddings are always so fast paced and busy and so many people around. It's nice for them to just have a minute to like look at each other as bride and groom. Sorry. And then there's a reception. In some places they do dancing separate for men and women. Sometimes it's all together. A wedding reception pretty much always includes a feast, which has at minimum bread and wine, but hopefully a lot more food than that. And like I said, it's a commandment to bring joy to the bride and groom. So you'll see funny things at weddings sometimes. You'll have people dress up in silly costumes or come, juggle or do silly dances or whatever they can do to make the bride and groom smile. Very happy. And at the end of the wedding, they say Birkat Hamazon, which is the grace after meals, and they repeat the Sheva Brachot, those 7 blessings. And there's a tradition for traditional Jewish weddings that they have a party every night for 7 days. 7 days, and each day when they say the Birkat Hamazon, the blessing after meals, they repeat these seven blessings again. So unlike most weddings where you might have a honeymoon afterwards, with Orthodox weddings, they don't go on a honeymoon because they have these parties every day for 7 days. If you think weddings are exhausting, imagine a week of parties. I'll tell you a little hidden meaning for it. So I mentioned before the mikvah, right? So in traditional Orthodox communities, when a woman is during her monthly cycle, when she's bleeding, the man and woman not only do not have relations, they don't even touch each other. Like they're separate for that time. And after she's gone to mikvah, then they can be back together. So if you have a man and woman who are coming from a traditional world and they are being intimate for the very first time on their wedding night, and then the woman would bleed, then they can't be together again intimately for 7 days. So if you can imagine a couple that has never been together, never been with anyone in their lives, they get to be together once and then they have to be apart for a week. I think the parties of the Sheva Brachot keep them busy during that week. questions about weddings? I do want to say I was giving you most of the Orthodox traditions. A non-Orthodox wedding will include parts of those and not all of them, and will be interpreted differently, and there might be a different, the ketubah might be less traditional in their wording, or the bride and groom might sign it, or like all sorts of different ways of doing it and interpreting it. Questions, comments, anything you've seen at Jewish weddings that you want to add that I missed?
Are there still arranged marriages
For sure, but I
Sure.
really want to be clear about arranged marriages.
where
Okay,
the bride and groom actually are not together, I mean, a date in the same room together?
so that's what I was gonna say, is arranged marriages, even in the most traditional of communities,
Mhm.
the man and the woman meet each other multiple times before the wedding. And if they don't like each other, if either of them doesn't agree, the wedding doesn't happen. Now, the time they spend together, it is not what you would consider typical dating, right?
Right.
So if you've ever been either in Israel or in cities with big Jewish communities, if you go into a hotel lobby, you may often see very Orthodox looking, very young looking boy and girl sitting together at a table, having a cup of coffee or a soda, that the dates are in very public places. They're not gonna be alone together. And they spend hours and hours and hours and hours together over probably 4 or 5 more dates, really getting to know one another, and there's no touching, right? So it's all about getting to know each other, really deep conversations about what they want from life, what's important to them, who they are. I honestly think that in these arranged marriages, they often know each other way better than people who've been dating for years. Because they have these deep conversations, and none of the relationship is based on the physical. I will tell you just briefly that my daughter had, I would say, a semi-arranged marriage. She went onto a website called Saw You at Sinai that has a matchmaker that looks at all these profiles and puts them together. They met each other during COVID. At the end of COVID, he was in Jerusalem, she was in Chicago. The first 5 months they knew each other, it was entirely on Zoom. And by the time he came here to finally meet her in person, he already had a ring.
Wow.
We were really pushy, and we made them wait a few weeks to actually spend some time in the same room together. Because I'm like, that's just not okay. But I'm married 3.5 years, and babies due in a month, so, yeah, so it definitely still happens.
There was a show in Israel months ago called Vote. Vote means I give you the, how do you say in English? I want to marry this person. In Netflix, she bought the show, so very soon we're gonna
It'll
see
be
it
a
here.
vort. A vort is often at the, like an engagement
vort.
part, it's like an engagement party, and the bride's family and the groom's family will come together, and the groom will share some words of Torah, and they'll drink l'chaim, and it's the official engagement.
So Netflix.
I'll have to look for
My sister did,
the arranged marriage.
they were set up, but she went on some really bad dates before.
And she didn't marry any of them. It wasn't like if you're
Exactly.
set up, then you have to. It's not that. It's not that you meet at the wedding here.
And then his family's actually from Milwaukee, but they met in. And you can give us a little back to stuff.
All right, I'm gonna pivot us to funerals, because I realize we're more than halfway through our time. Somebody want to read us this text from Deuteronomy?
Shall not leave his body on the pole overnight, rather you shall bury him on that same day, for a hanging human corpse is a blasphemy of God. And you shall not defile your land, which the Lord your God is giving you as inheritance.
So this from Deuteronomy, it's actually talking about the death penalty, but even if a person has the death penalty, they still get buried, right away. Jewish funerals and how death is handled in Judaism, I think, is unique and different than any other community. I think it has a lot that is very healthy in a mental health type of way. I'll share. So before the funeral, after someone dies, before the funeral, the focus is on the person who died. Everything you're doing in that first period is all focused on the person who died, not the people who have survived. Okay, and it's based on this idea that the human body is a gift from God. It's like it's on loan to us while the person is on in the world, and it has to be treated with respect. So from the moment somebody dies until they're buried, that body should never be left alone. Somebody stays with that body at all times. When not my mother, she was out of town. When my mother-in-law died, I stayed with the body until the funeral home came to get them. And then there was somebody sitting with them the whole time, that guarding the body, saying psalms. Because the idea is before the person is buried, their soul is still very close. So somebody should be with them. There's a whole process of preparing the body. It's called tahara, which literally means purification. You remember before I talked about the mikvah and dipping in the mikvah? This is sort of a mikvah except for a person who is dead. The preparing of the body is performed by a group. It's called the Hever Kadisha, which literally means Holy Society. Every Jewish community has one, and there's usually just one for the whole community. This is a time where you have lots of different groups of Jews in the community, but there's one group that does this. It's considered the most holy work you can do, because any kind of good deed you do for another person, in some way there may be repayment. If nothing else, just saying thank you, right? There's no thank you for preparing a body. For the grave, you do it, it's very selfless. Person who does it is the same gender as the body. Women prepare a woman, men prepare a man. And the body's washed one section at a time, right? So the whole body's covered, you uncover the leg and you wash and purify that leg, then you cover it, then you cover the other leg, you do it, etc. You remove all jewelry, all makeup, all prosthetics. The water's poured over, there's some prayers who are said. And a very beautiful way at the very end, before where the Hever Kadisha is finishing purifying the body, you apologize to the person. If you knew them, you're apologizing in case anything you might have done wrong to hurt them in their lives, or if you made a mistake in the preparation. That's the end of it. After the body's prepared, there's no embalming. There's no, traditionally in Judaism, no cremation, sorry. The body is wrapped in a plain white shroud. Like I said, sometimes a man's put in his kittel, because everybody is equal in death. There's no fancy or unfancy clothes. And ideally, you're put in a plain pine box, the simplest casket you can be. It has wood instead of nails, they use wood dowels because there shouldn't be any like tools of war. And ideally, you have you have the funeral as soon as possible after the person dies. So when my father-in-law died, it was on a Thursday afternoon. His funeral was Friday morning. Like, you do it as quickly as possible for a couple reasons. First is the respect of this person who's died, right? That they shouldn't be, again, you want to show them respect, and you're not embalming, so you don't want a body laying around. But I will also say it is a time, it's this in-between time for the family. That until the person's buried, you're not really officially a mourner. This is in-between time that's very hard. And so I think that's part of it too. Funerals are not held on Shabbat or on Jewish holidays. The response when you hear someone die is to say Baruch Dayan Emet, which means blessed is the righteous judge, which is a very hard thing to say when somebody dies. You hear somebody dies and it's painful. It's not necessarily a time when you want to say how righteous God is. For judging that way, it's a hard thing to say. From the time the person dies until the person is buried, their immediate family member is called an onen. It's like a person of sorrow. And an oneg doesn't perform any other commandments. So all the other things you would have to do, like praying 3 times a day, or a man putting on tefillin, or a woman lighting Shabbat candles, all those things you would do, you don't do. Because that's why I'm saying it's this in-between time, because you're totally focused on the person who died. So at the funerals can sometimes be at a funeral home. Sorry.
I had a question.
Yeah.
So let's say, I don't know if we know this, but like 200 years ago, before we had our modern technology, and it was too cold to like bury somebody, what would they do?
It's a really interesting question.
Yeah.
There was a funeral of somebody. I was at a funeral. I didn't go to the cemetery, but last week when it was like 2 weeks ago, it was like 30 below, and I was wondering how they were gonna dig the ground.
Yeah.
Because my mom was that cold.
Yeah.
They actually were able to dig it up.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they tried.
I'm
they could've-
thinking like hundreds of years ago.
Right, if they
Like
really,
before
really
we had the technology we have now, like, I'm like, how did our ancestors do it? Like, I'm wondering.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't know. mean,
yeah, I
I'm
don't
sure
know if
that
we have
they must-
documentation.
Right.
Yeah,
It's a really
yeah.
interesting question.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
Any other question?
Yeah.
So sometimes it's funerals at a funeral home or synagogue, or sometimes it's held graveside. One of the things of the immediate family members, so that's the mother, the father, the siblings, the children, God forbid, parent for a child. Those are the immediate mourners. You tear your clothes to show it's showing the pain that you're in. Sometimes people will attach a ribbon and tear the ribbons, they don't have to ruin their clothes, sometimes you actually tear your clothes, and that, it symbolizes the mourning, and mourners will wear that during the whole week of mourning, they'll wear the torn clothes. There's a lot of psalms read, there are eulogies given to remember the people who died. There's a prayer called El Malay Rachamim, which means God full of mercy, which is usually chanted,
The rabbi said actually ripped our clothes.
tore the ribbon for you, yeah, rather than tear.
Don't tear, ripped our clothes.
Yeah.
She ripped our clothes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Traditional, Jewish funerals do not have flowers. I think the idea is that flowers die, so you're already remembering somebody's died, you want something that's dead, usually not instruments either. There are pallbearers who will escort the casket, while psalms are read, people usually stand quietly while the casket's escorted out. In some communities, and this is probably more of an older time when communities were smaller, people would literally walk behind the casket all the way to the ceremony as a way of showing respect.
In Israel, we don't have a casket.
Right, so a traditional Jewish funeral, you wouldn't have a casket, you would just wrap them in the sheet and put them in the ground. Most places in the US, I think that's not legal, which is why they use caskets. Although now they're going to these green funerals, so it may be coming, but yeah, in Israel, they don't, so the caskets.
It's legally like watered, like, yeah, they don't, yeah.
What is a great funeral?
When it's like more natural.
Right, and it's exactly what Jewish funerals are about, the idea of ashes to
Yeah.
ashes, dust to dust, there's not supposed to be anything coming between you and the ground, that's what a green funeral is.
Actually, we have a cemetery that does green, what's it called, green field, or not, whatever it is. We have a cemetery in Milwaukee, it's one of the oldest cemeteries in the country that'll do green burials, yeah. It's a Jewish cemetery.
The Kaddish prayer is said, which is a prayer for the dead, is said by the mourners, not till after the person, the casket is lowered into the ground and the person is buried, then that's said. It's an interesting prayer because it doesn't mention death at all, but it's a prayer that mourners say, saying that God is great. You needed 10 adults in order to say Kaddish. And then Kaddish is said traditionally 3 times a day for the first month for the child or the sibling or the spouse. For a parent, you say it 3 times a day for an entire 11 months. Some dirt from the land of Israel is often sprinkled over the casket to connect us to Israel. It's traditional for everyone at the funeral to take 3 shovels of dirt and help with the burial. Often you take the first shovelful upside down to show that you're not eager to do this. The mitzvah, one of the most beautiful explanations I've heard from a rabbi is that when you're doing this burial, it's like covering them with a blanket, like you're putting them to bed. Some funerals, like everybody will do a little bit and then they bring in a machine to do the rest. Some traditional funerals, literally everybody who's there for the funeral will do the burial until everything's covered. I have a nephew who was not raised Jewish, and we went to his funeral. And they finished the funeral, and then the casket was just sitting there, and they didn't even lower it into the ground or do the burial until everybody left. And my family, who was used to Jewish funerals, were like, totally, like it like we were unsettled, like we didn't finish. Like, how do you say goodbye when they haven't? That was a big difference. All right, after the funeral, this is actually a very beautiful tradition. After the funeral, people will form 2 lines and the mourners walk between them, and the community says to them together, may you be comforted among the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. And some people add, and may you know more of your suffering. And I will say that when I lost my mom, which was very painful, that helped me so much. And they actually, every day at Minyan, they'd say it to me again and again and again. I found it incredibly strengthening. When my husband lost his parents, he hated it Because he felt like everybody was staring at him, so I guess it would depend on the person. And the reason you use those specific words, and you'll see them on like cards if somebody dies, is because there's no right words, there's no right thing to say when somebody dies, and so we're hoping that God will do the comfort. Kohanim, who are the priests from the Holy Temple, people who descended from Aaron, people of last name Cohen or Khan or Katz, etc., traditionally don't enter a cemetery because it has to do with ritual impurity. And when you leave the cemetery, you do a ritual washing of hands to kind of remove the spiritual impurity. So after the funeral, as soon as the burial ends, that's when the focus shifts from the person who died to the mourners. And then it's about comforting the mourners. So the first thing that happens is people go back to the home and there's a meal of consolation that usually includes hard-boiled eggs, some bread. The egg is like symbolizes the roundness of life, the continuation of life. And it's an obligation for the mourners to eat something. So the people there will bring them food because you have to continue living. And fish and likes. There's water outside usually, so you can wash your hands for the cemetery. That usually meal right is just for close friends. And then they light a memorial candle that burns for 7 days for the Shiva. The flame represents the soul. So Shiva, which comes from the word seven, Shiva, this is again in traditional Orthodox circles. For 7 days, the mourners stay at home. They don't go out, they don't go to work, they don't cook, they don't clean, they don't shower, they don't wear new clothes, they don't wear shoes, they don't shave or wear perfume, they go to work, they don't listen to music. Their whole focus is remembering the person who died. It's not about their appearance. Sometimes people will cover their mirrors because you're not supposed to be looking in the mirror. You're focused on the grief. If you have torn clothes, you might wear that piece of clothing all the way through Shiva. In the modern world, people who are less traditional will often do Shiva for less than the 7 days. They'll do it for 5 days or 3 days or 1 day at different people, but traditionally it's 7 days. Family and friends prepare meals. The mourners sit on low stools or on the floor, this morning. And people will come to the house 3 times a day to have a quorum so that the family can say Kaddish and say that prayer. All those things with mourners stop during the Sabbath. So Friday night to Saturday, that stops. The people will go to synagogue to say, the Kaddish prayer. You shower, you change clothes because we don't mourn during the Sabbath. So what happens during that week while you're sitting home? People come and make a Shiva call or condolence call. It's traditional when you make a Shiva call to let the people who are mourning speak first and let them lead the conversation. If they just want to sit quietly, that's okay too. I will tell you, I have very early memory when I was 8 and my grandmother died and I was heartbroken, and all these people in our house for Shiva, and I remember getting very angry because I felt like they were having a party. And why were they having a party and talking and laughing and having fun when my grandmother died? Didn't they realize this was sad? But this time of being devoted to Shiva, the person who had the mourners lead the conversation. And if what they want is to share happy stories and hear good memories and focus on the good, that's what they should do. If they want to talk about how the person died, that's what they should do. They don't want to talk at all and want to sit quietly and be near people that they care about. That's what they should do. The family and the people who are mourning are the ones who guide it. I will say that when my mom died, it was just before COVID. And my dad was very grateful that it was before COVID when we could have Shiva, right? Because it was terrible during COVID and there weren't funerals and whatever. He stayed for 6 out of the 7 days. He didn't think he would like it, and a lot of people coming to our house didn't know him or my mom. They were coming to comfort me. And he found it so comforting. 6 years later, he still talks about it, how people just sat with him and listened to him and let him tell the same stories over and over again, and how much it helped. The counting of the 7 days starts on the day of the funeral. And then you want it to be as short as possible. So even if the burial is Wednesday afternoon, that day counts as 1. And when you get to Tuesday morning, that's your 7th day. It ends in the morning. So it's as short as possible. And this traditional at the end of Shiva for the mourners to get up and take a walk around the block. Just to kind of symbolize re-entering the world. There are also all sorts of other different traditions of what you do with it. So the first 30 days, which are called Shloshim, are less intense mourning than that week Shiva, but still some type of funeral, right? So you can go to work, you can shower, you can uncover your mirrors and sit on regular chairs, you're still in mourning. So you might not shave, you might not listen to music or go to weddings or parties. And at the end of that Shloshim, it's traditional to do something special to remember the deceased. You might, do a luncheon at the synagogue, or you might raise a l'chaim and, bring a toast to them. And at the end of that 30 days, that's the end of the mourning period for everybody, except if it's your parent. And if it's your parent, it continues for a year. For that whole year, you are in mourning. And again, traditionally, people don't listen to music, go to weddings, go to parties, say Kaddish every day, 3 times a day for 11 months, not for 12. Anybody know why 12? So the Kaddish prayer that you're saying is supposed to elevate the soul, right? And in Jewish tradition, there's this time between when you die and when you would go to heaven, where depending on how well you lived your life, your soul might not need to be doing some repenting. And the longest time that any soul might have to wait to go to heaven is 12 months, is a year. And nobody wants to think of their parent as being the absolute worst they could be. So you say this prayer for 11 months. And then after the year is done, the mourning is over. But then every year on the anniversary of the person's death, which is called Yortzeit, you remember the person again. You light a 24-hour candle that burns to remember them. You say that same prayer again to remember. And this is why I was saying that I think that the way that Judaism handles death is very healthy. It's a lot of respect, but it also lets you go through a process, right? If you don't, I don't know what it looks like if you don't have that, but somebody dies, you have a funeral, and then the next day you're supposed to go back to your life. It's what does that look like? And if there's no framework to say, okay, the first month is really, really sad, and after that you're still sad, but not as quite as sad as the year, it's very built in. I also once asked a rabbi, why is it for a parent, you're mourning for a whole year, but a spouse only a month? A spouse, your life partner, you would think that would be a big deal. And my rabbi said something I thought profound.
I didn't.
So
You would still wanna go to youth court.
you still have your site, and we'll get to your skirt in a minute. So here's the difference.
Why did they say?
So here's why they said. You lose a parent, and ideally the way it works, right? Somebody, is a child bearing the parent, not a parent bearing a child, God forbid. You lose a parent, you're busy, right? You have kids, you have a job, you have all sorts of things you're doing. As close as I was with my mom, once in a while there was a day that went past and I didn't think about her because I got busy or whatever. The rabbi said to me, when you lose a spouse, it's not a moment that goes by that you don't remember. You climb into bed every night and you know. So you don't have to have a whole year of saying this prayer every day to remember that you're missing your spouse. All right, stone dedication is traditionally held sometime during the first year. It doesn't have to be a certain time. And let's come together and you say the Kaddish at the cemetery. At Jewish cemeteries, they said you don't bring flowers. Traditionally, you put a stone on headstone. And unlike flowers which die, the stone is there forever. My mother-in-law and father-in-law have a flat stone on there. There's a flat grave. My mother's is like this. So I put stones there and then I go back and they've all fallen off. When I die, I want the flat. Because I go back to my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, and all the stones that were there, for the last 10 visits, they're all still there. But it's really amazing thing. You go and you see other people have remembered these things. I'm almost touching. Yizkor is a prayer that's said 4 times a year on these 4 holidays to remember the dead. People come together. It's a special service. Usually during that service, anyone who has not lost a parent leaves the room. And the names of the people who died are said, and they say that the souls of those who departed are in the room with you. It's a very powerful moment. I got through that and I have 3 minutes to spare. I said a lot of stuff. Are there questions, comments?
Can I say something?
Please.
My grandma passed away 2 days before my wedding. And the rabbi said that a newlywed, a bride cannot go to the cemetery 2 days after the wedding. So I didn't go to the cemetery. I didn't know there was something like that. And the next thing, when I went to Israel to see Shiva for my father, JCC, they were in Israel, Mark Shapiro, the whole Karuna, they came to my house. 20 people. They respect.
I will say that what you're saying about a wedding or an engagement, you're not supposed to put them off for a funeral. Like if God forbid even somebody's parent dies, you're not supposed to cancel the wedding.
Not cancel, I
Right,
couldn't
but
go
no,
to the
that's saying you're
cemetery.
still not even supposed to, there's somebody in our synagogue who, his father died the day of his wedding. That morning at his wedding, and they still went ahead of the wedding, because you don't wanna cancel the joy, you don't wanna, not have it happen, because it's that important.
But you're not joyful, but you still have to.
You still have to go through the motion, I mean, maybe you don't have the same kind of party, maybe it looks different, or the thing I told you about here, you're not supposed to go to a wedding that first year after you've had a loss, the exception is, like, if your child is in a wedding, and it would decrease their joy if you're not there, then you go. Right, because it's all about the joy of the bride and the groom. But you're right, like that whole first year, it's hard. I remember my mom died in December, and I remember going to the celebration for Purim that year. It's a big party at the synagogue, and I asked my rabbi, do we go, there's music, whatever, he's like, but don't dance, don't like be overly joyful, and I remember sitting there like, I don't belong, like I'm supposed to be here because of the holiday, but I just couldn't, like, it was really difficult.
I have a question. Why do you sit on a chair or a stool?
Why you're sitting low?
Yes.
It's interesting. All through the Bible, if you look back, they talk about people sitting on the floor in mourning and wearing sackcloth and ashes. I think it's a sign of mourning, right? That you're not supposed to have comfort. The same reason you don't wear shoes. You're not supposed to be comfortable.
It's Babylonia when they sat with
They
the
sat,
sack.
right, with the sackcloth and ashes, and they sat on the floor. Yeah, it's just a sign of mourning.
The other thing that I remember when my grandfather died, and I don't know that they do that anymore, but the funeral procession went past the synagogue and they opened the doors to the synagogue.
Interesting. I've not heard that before. That's interesting.
Yep.
I know when I was pregnant with my daughter, somebody had passed away in the family and I wasn't allowed to go to that funeral.
Yeah, I think that there's something about that too. And it's actually,
to
yeah.
go.
I will say that the only time I did the tahara that I did, not the first time, not the only time, when I was going and preparing a body for the dead, I was pregnant with my daughter. And I didn't know you weren't supposed to do it. In the middle of the tahara, I mentioned to the other people there I was pregnant and they freaked out. They're like, you shouldn't be here, you shouldn't be here.
I know the rabbi told my sister not to go, my nieces. When mom passed away, he said, not from the, I was Israel. I still.
Yeah, I don't know. I was not allowed to go to my grandmother's funeral, the one I was talking about before, and it's a regret I have. Like, I feel like I missed something by not being there, like I wasn't able to get closure and say goodbye. So I think that's the kind of thing the parent has to know their child and know what's right. I will tell you though, I really believe in bringing children to Shiva houses. I was bringing Shoshi to Shiva house at age 3. And she would just go and sit next to the person who was mourning. And she'd just sit there. And I thought, first of all, I just think it often brought comfort. But I think it's also a good thing for kids to learn, to try and comfort other people.
I remember going to a few as a kid, but I would go and play with my cousins after a little while.
Because you know there. Right, but I know people who as adults have never been to a funeral before and they don't know how to act and they don't know what to do. And I think it's a teaching moment.
I don't know if I was there for the burial.
No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about
Yeah,
the Shiva,
yeah,
not the
exactly.
burial, the Shiva. All right, that was a lot of heavy stuff today. Thank you. for everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Victoria. I'm doing my mom's excuse me. I just showed the house.